Mr. Musk, she said softly, but with a serious look in her eyes, I have a question for you. Elon Musk was visiting a small hospital, spending time with doctors and patients, a regular part of his charity efforts. He enjoyed doing this, but today he didn't expect to be stopped by a young girl. He smiled, assuming she'd ask something light or playful. Sure, he replied warmly. But then, without hesitation, the girl asked, What do you think happens when we die? Elon blinked. That wasn't the question he was expecting. Not from a child. He tried to keep his expression calm, but the depth of the question caught him off guard. He looked at her innocent face, amazed that someone so young could ask something so profound. There was no backing out now. He had to answer. He paused for a moment. He'd spent his life working with rockets, artificial intelligence, and electric cars. But this was different. This was personal, emotional, uncertain. He had always trusted science, logic, things you could prove or measure. But this question reached into something deeper. Looking into the girl's curious eyes, he said gently, That's a really big question. And honestly, I don't have all the answers. But I can tell you what I believe. He paused again, searching for the right words. The room around them had grown quiet. Others were listening too. The little girl stood patiently, her hands clasped together, waiting for his reply. You see, Elon continued, there's still so much we don't understand about the world. Science helps us learn incredible things about the universe, the stars, the planets. But there are still mysteries we haven't solved. He shifted slightly, choosing his next words with care. He looked back at her. Her eyes were wide, hopeful, like she was waiting for a little bit of magic. Maybe, he said slowly, we don't really know what happens when we die. But I think the world we live in, this beautiful planet, is part of something much bigger, something amazing. The girl narrowed her eyes a little, trying to understand. She clearly wasn't fully satisfied yet. Something was still on her mind. So, she asked, tilting her head, are you saying that when we die, we go back to being part of the stars? Her voice carried a hint of uncertainty, but it was clear she wasn't finished yet. Elon didn't answer right away. He hadn't really thought about it in that way before. It wasn't the kind of question you could just answer with a quick sentence. He scratched his chin, feeling the weight of the moment. He realized how much his words might mean. He'd built companies that had changed the world, tackled some of the toughest technical problems on Earth. But this was something else. This wasn't about technology. It was about something much deeper, something that touched the heart. I'm not sure, Elon said at last, shaking his head slightly. But maybe we don't have to know everything right now. Maybe it's okay not to have all the answers. The girl looked at him, thinking quietly. Then she spoke again, her voice softer this time, but full of a kind of depth that surprised him. But what if there's a God? She asked, her eyes searching his face, looking for something. Maybe reassurance. Elon felt a jolt in his chest. God. It wasn't a question he was expecting, and it stirred something unfamiliar inside him. Here was a child, asking the one question most adults didn't dare say out loud. He took a slow breath. He had grown up surrounded by logic, driven by science and reason. His world was one of innovation, data, and facts. But this question wasn't about any of those things. It came from a deeper place, maybe even the soul. I think, Elon began, choosing his words with care, that people believe different things. Some believe in God, some believe in science, and some believe in both. He looked her in the eyes. But I do believe that having faith in something greater than ourselves, whatever that may be, can give us hope. Her expression shifted, just slightly. It wasn't the answer she was expecting, but it made her pause. She seemed to be thinking hard. But what if God isn't real? She asked, her voice trembling, almost as if she was afraid of her own question. Elon paused again. This conversation was becoming far more difficult than he'd imagined, but he couldn't give her a false answer. He knew that. "I don't know if I can answer that for you," he said gently. "But I do think it's okay to ask those kinds of questions. Maybe that's where it all begins, just being brave enough to ask. And maybe that's how we start finding the answers we need." The little girl sat quietly for a moment, her small hands tightly clasped in her lap. Elon watched her, wondering if he had said the right thing. He could see she was deep in thought, her mind turning over his words. But he also noticed something else, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "You know," she whispered, barely loud enough to hear, "I've always wondered if God is real. But sometimes I'm scared. What if I never find out?" Elon felt a pang in his chest. Her fear was so real, so honest. It wasn't just her fear, it was the same one many grown-ups carried too. The fear of not knowing, of the unknown. He leaned in a little closer, his eyes soft with empathy. "It's okay to be scared," he said gently. "But remember, you're never alone. There are people who love you, people who care. And even when you're unsure, there's always something to hold on to, something worth believing in. It's okay to keep searching for answers." The little girl looked up at him, her eyes brimming with emotion. For a moment, the world around them seemed to fade away. Then, slowly, tears began to roll down her cheeks. Elon was caught off guard. He wasn't used to seeing children cry, especially after a conversation like this. But he understood. She wasn't just crying from sadness. It was something deeper, a release of feelings she'd kept inside for a long time. Somehow, his words had touched that place. He reached out and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Hey," he said softly, "it's okay to cry. Really, sometimes we all need to let things out. But remember, you don't need to have all the answers today. What matters is that you keep asking, keep wondering. That's how we grow." She nodded through her tears, wiping her face with the back of her hand. The moment stretched, still and quiet, but full of meaning. And somehow Elon knew this was one of the most powerful moments he had ever experienced. As she wiped away the last of her tears, Elon stood silently, feeling a kind of peace settle over him. Something inside him had shifted. He wasn't just the man of science, innovation, and logic anymore. He had just seen the raw, tender heart of humanity. "Thank you for asking me that," Elon said softly. "I may not have all the answers." "I may not have all the answers," Elon finished, "but you've made me think in ways I never have before." The little girl gave a faint, thoughtful smile, looking up at him with a new light in her eyes. She didn't have all the answers either, but for the first time that felt okay. Elon turned to walk away, but as he moved down the hallway, he glanced back one last time. She was still sitting there, quiet, deep in thought, yet something had changed. There was peace in her expression now, like a weight had been lifted. Sometimes the most innocent questions could leave the biggest impact, and for Elon, this moment would stay with him forever. The soft hum of the hospital filled the air as he walked away. Her question echoed in his mind, lingering longer than he expected. He had tried to give her the best answer he could. But was it enough? Had he said the right thing? A feeling tugged at him, that maybe he had missed something important. As he neared the elevator, his thoughts drifted to his own life, the companies he had built, the future he was trying to shape, all his ambition and innovation. But in the middle of it all, had he lost sight of something more essential? What if that little girl wasn't just asking for answers? What if she needed something deeper? Comfort, reassurance, hope. And maybe, what if we all did? He thought back to his own childhood, how curious he had been, always asking why. He had never been afraid of big questions, even when the answers didn't make sense. But now, faced with something as vast as life, death, and the idea of God, he felt like he was wandering in the dark. His mind returned to their conversation. He had spoken about science and the stars, but he hadn't really explored faith. Could science and faith exist together? Could they complement each other rather than stand apart? In the days that followed, Elon couldn't stop thinking about the little girl. Her face, her question, it all stayed with him. It had seemed like such a small moment in time, but to him, it felt like the beginning of something much bigger. Elon found himself thinking more and more about God, about what might come after this life. For the first time in a long time, he was searching, not for solutions in engineering or science, but for something deeper. These weren't questions about technology or the future of humanity. They were about the bigger picture, the mysteries that lay beyond what could be measured or built. He started spending quiet evenings reading books on faith, philosophy, and the nature of existence. He reached out to friends and colleagues from different backgrounds and beliefs, eager to hear their perspectives. Every conversation opened a new window, but none offered a complete answer. It felt like trying to solve a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. Still, something inside him began to shift. Over time, Elon started to realize that maybe the point wasn't to find a perfect answer. Maybe it was about learning to accept that some things are beyond human understanding. Maybe the real lesson was in learning to live peacefully with uncertainty. One night, sitting alone on his balcony and gazing up at the stars, Elon felt a quiet calm settle over him. For the first time, he wasn't chasing a solution. He just let himself wonder. And in that stillness, he understood. Maybe the question itself mattered just as much as the answer. Maybe the search for meaning was a kind of answer in its own right. Several weeks after his conversation with the little girl, Elon attended a dinner party. The room was filled with some of the most brilliant thinkers in the world, scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs, and philosophers. The discussion began, as it often did, with topics like space travel and artificial intelligence. But as the evening went on, the conversation turned to something less technical, the nature of the universe, and even, surprisingly, faith. Elon sat quietly, listening. Some around the table spoke passionately about science and reason. Others spoke of belief in something greater, a force, a presence, a higher power. He heard many points of view, but still said nothing, reflecting on his own evolving thoughts. Then an older woman seated across from him, who had remained silent most of the evening, finally spoke. There was a kindness in her eyes and a calm wisdom in the way she looked at him, as if she had seen a lifetime's worth of questions and answers. She leaned forward slightly and asked, "What about you, Mr. Musk? You've built rockets and reached for the stars. But when you look up at the night sky, what do you believe?" Elon paused, caught between the worlds of science and wonder. The question caught Elon by surprise. It wasn't about rockets or technology. It was something far more personal. He thought back to the little girl and the questions she had asked him. He remembered the way her words had stayed with him, how they had sparked his own search for answers. Could he respond now the same way he had responded to her? "I think," he began slowly, choosing his words with care, "the universe is full of mysteries. And no matter how much we learn, there's always something just beyond our understanding. Maybe that's part of what makes it so beautiful, the mystery itself." The woman across from him nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think that mystery could be a sign of something bigger?" she asked. Elon looked up at the stars through the window, lost in thought. "Maybe," he said. "I think it's possible there's something more out there, something that connects all of us. I don't have all the answers, but maybe that's okay. Maybe it's the search that matters most." The woman smiled warmly, as if she had been waiting for him to say that. "The search is everything," she said softly. "Sometimes it's the questions that bring us closest to understanding." A few months later, Elon returned to the hospital. He was there to visit a friend, but as he walked down the familiar hallway, something stirred in him, a quiet tug at his heart. He remembered her, the little girl who had asked him about God and what happens after we die. He wondered if she might still be there. He made his way toward the waiting area, and to his surprise, there she was, sitting in the same spot. A little older, maybe a year had passed, but her eyes still held that same spark of curiosity. This time she noticed him right away. She stood and walked toward him with a bright smile. "Mr. Musk," she said, her voice full of excitement. "You came back." Elon smiled, crouching down to her level. "I couldn't stay away," he said gently. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation." Her eyes lit up. "Really? About what happens when we die?" He nodded. "Yes, and about everything you asked me. I've been searching, trying to understand, and I've realized something important." The girl looked up at him, her expression full of wonder. "What did you realize?" the little girl asked softly. Elon smiled gently. "I realized that it's okay not to have all the answers," he said. "What really matters is the search for meaning, the act of asking questions. That's what connects us all. It's a journey we're all on together." The little girl's smile grew. There was a calmness in her expression, a quiet kind of understanding. She still didn't have all the answers either, but that no longer frightened her. She was beginning to understand that asking the right questions, being open to truth, and keeping a kind heart were just as important, maybe even more important, than knowing everything. Elon slowly stood up and looked at her one last time. "Keep asking, okay? Keep searching for what feels true to you." She nodded. "I will. Thank you, Mr. Musk." As Elon turned to walk away, a peaceful feeling settled over him, one he hadn't felt in a long time. He realized something powerful. Sometimes the most meaningful answers aren't found in the answers themselves, but in the questions we dare to ask and in the way we seek truth. From that moment on, Elon's view of the world began to shift. He continued to pursue his dreams, building rockets, advancing technology, imagining the future, but now with a broader heart and a more open mind. He began to accept that some things couldn't be explained by science alone. He came to believe that faith and curiosity could exist side by side. And even though he still didn't have all the answers, he had found peace in the search itself. The journey toward understanding, he realized, was just as valuable as the destination. As for the little girl, she grew older, always filled with questions, always searching for meaning. She came to see that life wasn't about having everything figured out. It was about learning, growing, and continuing to wonder. The search for truth, she understood, could last a lifetime, and that was okay. In his quietest moments, Elon would think of her. In her simple, honest questions, she had given him something he hadn't known he needed. A reminder that even the most brilliant minds sometimes need to pause and look inward. And so Elon began to share more of those thoughts, whether with colleagues, friends, or strangers. The little girl's voice still echoed in his heart, and her questions often came back to him in moments of reflection. He had learned something essential. Seeking truth isn't about having certainty. It's about embracing the unknown, with humility, wonder, and a heart willing to explore. In a world so driven by solving problems, perhaps the greatest lesson was simply this: to keep wondering. One evening, as Elon gazed up at the stars once again, he felt a deep sense of connection, not just to the vastness of space, but to the people he had met, the questions they had asked, and the mysteries that might never be fully understood. In that quiet moment, something profound became clear to him. No matter how far humanity reached, no matter how advanced our technology became, the search for meaning remained a common thread, binding us all together across generations, across galaxies. And sometimes the most powerful discoveries didn't happen in a lab or aboard a rocket. They happened in silence, in stillness, in moments of reflection. Years later, Elon would still think about that little girl with the big question. He never saw her again, but her words never left him. Her innocent curiosity had sparked something in him, a shift in perspective that stayed for good. In her, he had seen the courage to ask what so many were afraid to, and through her he had come to understand the quiet strength of embracing both faith and science, wonder and logic. She reminded him that life wasn't just about achieving the impossible or building the future. It was also about connection, belief, and holding space for the mysteries we may never solve. In the end, it wasn't just about reaching the stars. It was about remembering why we looked up in the first place.